In my last video, I mentioned that I have to do the same thing to science that I did to religion. That is, show you the lie, show you the truth, and true benefits. Now, I'm actually going to do this to physics. Physics is going to get a little thick, but I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. I'm also going to demystify it, so, because it's not actually as complex as it seems. It really isn't. So, in order to get this done, I actually have to start with time. I'm going to start this with an invention that is modern. Now, the invention that is modern is the geosatellite. Now, often we find that things are hidden in plain sight. Somebody points in one direction, so you don't look the other. We're going to look the other direction. The geosatellite is an interesting thing because it actually exists in a different time zone. Now, I mean literally in a different time zone. You see, here on Earth, if you test the clock at the equipment down here, the clock is working perfectly. If you go up to the satellite and test the clock, it is also working perfectly. Yet, down here on Earth, they have to have a team that constantly resets the clock on the geosatellite in order to give you real-time data. That is because time is actually traveling quicker where the satellite is than it is here on Earth. Your standard black hole theorem is that next to a black hole, light is almost at a standstill, and that falling into the planet's gravity could take 1,000 years for you, and to us we would see it as a flash. Now, that's all fine and dandy, that's interesting, but now let's look at the other place, empty space. Empty space, at that place time is flying by, it's screaming by, okay? I mean, it's going fast, because all of the space dust that used to be out there is now collected into large planets. There isn't an average speed of time because of a massive amount of dust spread over a great distance. It would still be fast time, but it's different now. As the mass collects, where the mass collects, time slows down. Really slows down. It's hitting the brakes. Where it has collected from is now empty space and truly becoming more and more vacuum as time goes by. And the reason that this is important is because it actually tells you a lot of truth, where before you might have had a misconception. For example, for every second that goes by here on Earth, in that place up there that is an empty space, we're going to do a thought experiment. In that place, in empty space, there is 1,000 seconds for every one of ours. Right? For every second that goes by here, 1,000 seconds go by there. Here's the thing. The speed of light is 3 times 10 to the 8th power, or 282,000 miles per second, plus a little bit. It's pretty fast. It doesn't change. In that place where there's 1,000 seconds for every one of ours, time is covering the distance of 1,000 times 3 times 10 to the 8th power. That's kind of a big deal because that destroys a light year. The whole concept of a light year is gone in that instant. Because the idea of a light year is it takes light a specific amount of time to get from there to here. This is not true, okay? From the perspective, from this point, okay, now light, as it travels away from, say, a heavy universe, or a heavy galaxy, okay, and a heavy planet in a heavy galaxy, it takes a little while for it to get up in speed. Time does, right? And then it hits this place where it's empty space. It's traveling for a vast distance of 1,000 seconds for every one of ours. And then as it enters a light galaxy and goes towards a small planet, it never quite slows down as much as it did where it was when it left. This means there's too many variables to actually calculate how long it took light to get from there to here in our seconds, because it's covering a huge distance, much larger distance than you might think, even though light hasn't itself actually increased in speed in time. Another thing that this does is this explains the expansion of the universe. They say, well, the universe seems to be accelerating and we don't know why. That is not true. They do know why. The universe is accelerating because time is accelerating. As space dust collects into planets and galaxies, space empties. In those places, time is accelerating as the mass is removed. Time is also deaccelerating where planets are, which means it's empty space that is accelerating and not the entire universe. Because the universe is round, and we know this, the universe is round, everything will eventually run into everything else. It's not accelerating away from itself. It's just time is accelerating. Empty space is accelerating. Where we are, mass is forming these things called filaments. Filaments is where large amounts of mass have collected together. The average speed of time is limited by the amount of mass in that area, and therefore, inside the filament, time is running really slow. So this destroys the accurate account of how old the universe is. There's no way to tell. Next to a black hole, in a heavy galaxy, the universe is going to be very young. You take a rogue planet, and for some reason it gets lost in that place where there's 1,000 seconds for every one of ours. In 1 billion years, it will be 1,000 billion years older than us, than our planet. So detecting the actual age of anything is, the variables are too massive to actually calculate. Stating that any age of the universe is a fallacy. So we now have the light year shattered to pieces, the acceleration of the universe shattered to pieces, and the age of the universe shattered to pieces, with a simple look in the other direction from a black hole. Now, I'm an intelligent person, but I'm not that smart. Not actually. The reason that I'm aware of this difference is because of the history of invention, not a course in physics. And so now I need to get into that history and why this situation is the way that it is. And this actually starts out with a man named Maxwell. Maxwell was the first person mathematically to prove the speed of light, and he turned out correct. But the math that he used is not what you would expect it to have been. He used what they call ether math, I guess you could say. Back then they believed in an all-pervasive ether, because just like oxygen needs to be here for sound waves to travel, they needed a medium for light waves to travel in. They started out with ether and began to study it in that fashion. Maxwell's equations, which turned out to be on spot, were based on ether calculations. This is a problem, and I'm going to explain why. In the history of science, there's a place where scientists made a really big mistake that they didn't see coming. It used to be that scientists published to the public newspaper what their latest experiments, their latest theories, their latest ideas. The mistake they made was talking in this public forum in front of everybody. And I mean, there were people who bought this newspaper just to read what the latest in science was going to put out. It was really, really popular. And all of the scientists of the day published in that newspaper. But they began to talk about extracting ether, or extracting energy directly from the ether. They did. It's in their newspaper broadcasts. And then what happened? Well, what happened is this. A man named J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and some other guy, I can't remember his name, they put their foot down. They said, no, you can't do this. This is not going to happen. Okay? If anybody gets energy from the ether, it's going to be us. You will no longer publish to the newspaper. You will no longer use the word ether. And you will find a way to fix this. Now, you might think that the scientific community would rebel against something like that. But these are powerful, wealthy people. You know? At this point, this is actually the invention of the peer review, or the journal that a scientist must publish to in order to get his work viewed by other scientists. And it was the end of publishing to a public newspaper, anything. So you want to look up the history of it, literally, this is the beginning of the peer review, where all of the information goes through a filter in order to make sure that nothing gets to the public eye they don't want to. Okay? And in any attempt or act of rebellion, they had to quash that really, really quick. And the story that they gave out on that is a lie. And I'm going to tell you what it really is. J.P. Morgan was the financier of the inventor of the electrical system we use today. His name was Nikola Tesla. He was the example. Everybody, they got to make an example of somebody, right? So they actually used a lie to cover up a lie, and it's quite crafty what they did. You see, in the books, they tell of a tale where J.P. Morgan did not want Tesla to finish his Tesla coil, which would have allowed radio waves to power the world, because he couldn't put a meter on it, and because Tesla had invented free energy that nobody could charge you for. That's why he ended Tesla's career. That's why he was such a bad guy. That is not true. And I can prove it with the history of invention. You see, the meter which you use at your home, which measures the amount of power that you use, is one of Tesla's inventions, based off of a unipolar generator. What he found is that by changing the frequency, you could change the speed of the disk, the direction the disk travels. You could make it stop, you could make it start, and by changing the size, you could change it. In the beginning days of the Tesla coil, the beginning days of radio, Tesla has built a circuit which was a combination lock. You hit this frequency, then this frequency, then this frequency in a row, and it unlocks or locks a circuit. Right? It's a combination lock. And he was the inventor of the very first, and builder of the very first remote control boat in history. And this is genius. He actually built a liquid phase MOSFET. MOSFET is a metal oxide transistor. What he did is, using a liquid with an acid or a salt in it, made it very conductive. Placed a metal oxide, which is an insulator, on the top, and then placed a high voltage battery across it. It was just about to break through that insulator, just like the clouds break through the earth when lightning hits it. That big old space where there's insulating air, right? All it would take was a little bit of energy from that coil when he hit the frequency to help pop that circuit. And voila, liquid phase MOSFET. Simple, sweet, and easy, and it worked. He had the ability to build a remote control boat before there were tubes and before there were transistors. Tesla could have put a meter on a Tesla coil in a heartbeat. Not only could he have put a meter, he could have put a remote control lock. Combination lock that turned it on or off if you didn't pay your bill. Now, you might think that you could just build a coil of your own. We have the FCC. They could have easily arranged to pass a law that said that frequency was designated for power and power use only. And anybody found breaking the law would get fined or jailed or something. Okay? So the whole concept of, oh, no, I couldn't put a meter on it. So we had to put the Tesla coil down. Believe me, if the Tesla coil was a viable, scientific, actual, viable energy system, the guy would have owned it, okay? He would have owned it in a heartbeat, and we'd be using it today, and it would have made him and his ancestors very wealthy. No. The other fallacy of it is that the Tesla coil was actually a viable anything, that he had to stop the Tesla coil from working. That's why they had to trash it and break it and destroy it and crush Tesla's work and his career and his reputation. I'm going to prove that wrong. See, The biggest Tesla coil Tesla ever built, his last really big build, J.P. Morgan paid for it. And he paid the equivalent of millions of dollars. In the official story, J.P. Morgan says, well, I thought he was trying to transmit voice. No, he didn't. J.P. Morgan is a control freak who just spent millions and millions of dollars on an experiment. You think he didn't drive out there and see and know exactly what Tesla was doing? Of course he did. He didn't think he was trying to transmit voice. J.P. Morgan was into generating power for people to buy. That's what he was doing. That's what Tesla was doing. Okay? Now, you get out there, and this absolutely massive Tesla coil, right? It goes as deep into the ground as it does high into the air. It has a giant donut terminal with little metal bubbles all over it. The thing's huge. It's a monstrosity. It's Tesla's finest build. It would have had the best circuit breakers. It would have the best of everything Tesla had ever learned building them. And he only turned it on once. I don't know, if you think about that for just a second. What kind of an engineer? I mean, the kind of engineer who's smart enough to engineer Niagara Falls is going to build this absolutely fantastic piece of equipment, make it as perfect as he can, and only turn it on once. Why? They talk about it in the books as though it was just this amazing thing because power went to the nearby town and it just lit this town up and all this energy was available. And da-da-da, it worked, it was great, the town had power. Well, that's exactly the problem. You see, what actually happened is the town literally lit up. It had plasma, they call it a flula or St. Elmo's fire, coming off of everything metal. Faucets, pumps, metal fence posts, everything. It's flying up everywhere in this town. This power is so fantastic. Every home in the area has power now. And they brag about it like that. But there's a problem. It's called nitric oxide and ozone. So nitric oxide, when it mixes with water, becomes nitric acid. And ozone is one of the most caustic substances on the planet. They use it to break down tires. It's one of the few things on the face of the earth that will eat a tire. And now they are pumping it, creating it, in every single home in that town. Literally pumping a poison gas into their homes by the gallon. Right? The Tesla coil was dead before it was ever invented. Tesla knew, as soon as he turned that thing off, I'm sure somebody got a hold of him somehow. And they informed him, hey, you can't do this. And he knew at that moment the Tesla coil was dead. He would have told J.P. Morgan this. J.P. Morgan would have known. Okay? Ozone is what they call lacrimatory. And that means it burns your eyes, your throat, your nose, your mouth, inflames mucus. You choke and gag on it. The lead scientist that did all of the chemical work on ozone to see chemically what could be done with it died of a strange form of leukemia. Ozone is toxic above 5%, I believe. Quite literally, we're talking poison gas. Really, really bad. Now, this means at this point that to J.P. Morgan, Tesla is dead. Okay? His invention isn't going to work. It isn't going to happen. He invested a lot of money. He's mad as hell. And the story is invented that he trashed Tesla's career over the supposed Tesla coil success or whatever. And the truth of it is, the reason Tesla's career went downhill, and the reason they had to trash his character, is over ether. See, Tesla, in the process of inventing radio and using Tesla coils, used Maxwell's equations constantly. Constantly. He knew exactly what he was doing, exactly how it worked, and he knew the ether was real. And he was not down to go along with J.P. Morgan's scam. Of course, the problem here, you might say, is, what does this actually mean? What are you saying? The ether is real? That J.P. Morgan has been spending the last 150 years, or his ancestors, trying to extract energy from it or hiding it from the world? That Tesla coil never had a chance of ever working and would have pumped poison gas into people's houses? What are you getting at? What's your point? Well, it's quite literally this, that these incredibly wealthy people used Einstein to perpetrate a fraud against the world. Okay? And don't get me wrong, I love Einstein. Einstein is a shit. He left a trail of breadcrumbs back to ether the rest of his career. See, ether was the original unified field theory, the single unified field from which all matter and energy comes from. He would spend the rest of his career looking for the unified field theory, which is actually what he started with. And the theory of relativity would then be made to supposedly have a conflict with the quantum mechanics. But that conflict doesn't actually exist, because if you take the ether and put it back in, that conflict disappears. Right? Einstein was smart. Now, these people have just made an example of Tesla. They have people believing that Tesla is so crazy now, he fell in love with a pigeon. He didn't. He was gay. He was in love with a man. The same man that he was with when he invented the AC motor. Okay? Which went out Edison for powering the world. So, literally, they just absolutely trashed Tesla. And he was a rock star. The whole world knew his name. They almost completely erased him from history. They took his, they even went as far as taking his display out of the Smithsonian Museum. All these scientists knew what was at stake. Their careers, their livelihood, their reputation, any financial solvency, any future whatsoever. Einstein becoming the figurehead put him in a place where he was able to be rebellious and right in front of their face flaunt the ether constantly. Things like space-time, ether, right? So, and always looking for the unified field theory, and E equals mc squared. I'll get into that in my next video.